Nexus. Thanks so much for joining us. Would you mind taking a moment to introduce yourself?
Well, my name's William Penton. In the GitKraken Slack, I am known as Nexus. Nothing to see here. Um, and if you know, you know. Um, but yeah, I've been a GitKraken user since about 2016. So been around a long time. Uh, and I expect to be around for a long time to come.
Excellent. And you would describe yourself as a power Linux user or someone who's very familiar with Linux?
I would say I know quite enough to be dangerous in Linux, to a point where I have a certain amount of confidence. It's like, oh yeah, I think I can get that done. I think I can do that. And given enough brute force, I could get it done. And but I I try to keep myself humble. It's like, no, I'm not a power user, but like I know what I'm doing, sort of.
Excellent. First question for you. How would you describe Linux users in one sentence?
I can boil most Linux user down to about one word: passionate. Linux, it was born from a desire to be able to use hardware that Linus Torvalds actually already had access to without needing to spend a small fortune on, the software just to use it. And, having that type of drive and resourcefulness is like the lifeblood of the Linux community, even throughout to today. And every project, package, service, driver, widget has at least one person on that thing that is extremely passionate about that. And and same with, like, computer languages, they use to develop them in. It's like they're very passionate. And most of the time it starts off with a thought of like, you know I wonder if I can do this with this language. Let me see. And then that's how, whatever thing that you're doing is born. Like Node.
It's pretty relevant. So it sounds like we got a lot of tinkerers
Yes.
there. Oh yeah. So Linux users, what would you say a Linux user's value? What's important to them?
Well, if you have like X number of Linux users, then you'll have at least that many things that they'll find valuable or important. But I personally believe that most would agree that the quality and transparency are amongst the highest on their list, which is why you have, Linux, the kernel itself, and so many projects. All the core programs, they're all open source, transparent, so that you can see what's under the hood, so that you can trust what it's doing. And so if I don't trust it, then why would I use it? So that's where it kind of, in my opinion, where most Linux users, tend towards with their values.
One follow-up question to that. Would you say where does that trust come from? Is the fact that it's open source, just even having the ability to go into the code and look through it yourself, would that be a major source of the trust, or where would you say that usually comes from?
It's like the transparency of, well, if they are going to be doing something nefarious with it, then they are most likely going to want to hide it. And if I can't understand what it's doing, then why would I trust what it's doing? And there's been many cases throughout the years where, questionable code, whether it's like, okay, I don't understand what point this code is doing here, so we're just not going to accept it. Or from certain, organizations, they're like, we don't trust this organization because they have a track record of not being, very transparent with either where they get their information or the motives behind why they're doing certain things a certain way. Even with like, especially with like encryption, everybody wants a backdoor to be able to, make sure that you're not saying things that you shouldn't be saying. So I want to be able to make sure that, like, no, I want something that's secure. So because let's say whatever alphabet agency has trying to commit changes to a cryptographic function, lots of those agencies are actually rejected because we don't trust that what they're providing is transparent enough or open enough. So they say, no, thank you.
I see. So there'll be instances where you might have an entity try to make a pull request into some open source project and the maintainers say that does not meet our standards, therefore
Correct.
try again.
Right.
Maybe.
Um, was it the Open SSH that had that issue, quite a number of years ago? I remember there being a problem with the RSA
Mhm.
cryptographic functions, and people. I mean, the Linux community, we're a smart community where, and we also we trust, but we verify. Like we need to have that verification process to gain that trust. And so that's where it kind of like all ties together.
So now we're going to get into GitKraken Client a bit. So from your
All right.
perspective, can you tell me a bit about life before using GitKraken Client? What did versioning look like on Linux?
Well, for me, um, I didn't get into version control until I, found Git, and that was for work related reasons. But whenever I first started with Git, it was command line, and I was not good. I've messed up many repositories back in those days, where it's like, oh, well, I need to reclone the repo because something went wrong and I can't recover from it. So it was like I didn't know what I was doing. Um, but eventually I came across this, awesome, you know, GUI for Git that's like, hey, let's take all the command line, wizardry and let's give you a couple extra buttons that just helps you out, especially that undo button.
The good
And
button.
but they did, Linux, back whenever I first found GitKraken in 2016, um, there were other Git GUIs, but because of the fragmented nature of Linux in general, you don't really have a good unifying UI structure foundation to build off of and actually have it look like it's a worthwhile application that you're going to want to use. And the applications that have made a name for themselves have basically said, you know what, we're not going with the default standard. It works on everybody's system because it just does. We're going with our own UI, our own UX, and we're just going to make this the standard, like Open Office or any other mainstream applications where you just say, no, this is the interface and we're going to go with it. Um, but prior to that, I mean, I was using zip files for my version control, which yeah, I do not recommend.
That sounds
Uh,
painful.
no, it was.
So a lot of command line in the beginning if you're
Yes.
trying to use Git in the on a Linux system. So I guess that's a nice bridge to the next question. Were there any costs, and costs can be time too. Were there any costs or major pain points associated with, trying to use version control before trying something like a Kraken client?
Well, I mean, like I previously mentioned, I have, with the command line, I've spent literally, days, if not weeks, of lost time, lost effort, having to recode things because oops, I accidentally did something wrong and now I have messed up my repo. Um, and those are kind of like the growing pains because I mean of just learning in general. But once I did find a tool that was better, it's like, oh, well, let me put forth my time and effort into learning this tool, which will eventually make it where I don't have to spend as much time doing this task at all. Therefore, in the grand scheme of things, I actually spend less time saving more time, more money, and effort and everything on that.
So
And
ha- so have there been times where you've lost like hours or even days worth of work due to just a version control issue?
yes, I was working on, I forget what feature it was back whenever I was a junior dev. Weeks worth of stuff, and I don't remember exactly what I did. I must have fat fingered something, or I did a pull or merge or something like that to try to get my code up to date with everything. And all of a sudden, hey, where are all my changes? I just lost a week's worth of stuff. What?
A
Because
week?
a week. But
Oh.
you see, that's also it's like I said, I was a junior dev,
Mhm.
and this was probably 10 plus years ago. And I'm like, you didn't have a lot of people around me at the time saying, commit early and commit often. Like, it doesn't matter if it's done, you save your work. And then once you're all done, then you can merge all of your changes. It's like, oh, well, it makes more sense when you can visually see it with a graph saying, oh, okay, all of my changes are right here. And it's not in with the main set of code. So, okay, what I'm doing is fine. Plus, also, it gives anybody else that's trying to see, okay, well, what has this Joker been doing for the past week? You know, oh, he's been okay. I can see the progression of changes. It's like, okay, I can see his thought process because, oh, he's going down this road. Oh, no, he changed course. Now he's going down this road. Okay. And, it saves a lot of headaches. But see, a lot of that also is, you know, not just, are you using the right tool for the job, but also, are you using a proper, workflow? Because even, way back in the day, Git flow wasn't even a thing yet. But, now it is. And life is better because of it.
I appreciate you sharing your story of lost code.
uh, I honestly thought I was going to lose my job over that.
Oh, yeah, that
Because I'm like, I swear I've been working. It's like,
I guess so, yeah. If you lose it all, then they're like, well, what have you been doing?
exactly. It's like
Oops.
I had nothing to show for myself.
Oh no.
So like
Um,
I put in a lot of late nights the following week to catch back up. And I'm like, I remember roughly what I was doing, and it was hell. It was not fun at all. But see, just to go back to the
mhm.
the question just real quick. A lot of it also stems to back to, well, other team members are using, let's say, Git on Windows or Git on a Mac, or Git for, let's say they're on Linux but they're using a different distribution. Everybody's using a slightly different version of Git. I mean, I don't know what bugs are in your version that are helping you out versus not on mine that is causing pain for me. So there could be differences that are introduced in that way, or features that you have that I don't have. And Now, if everybody were using the exact same version, great. But not even within Linux. I mean, you have 10 different distributions. You have minimum 10 different versions of Git because not everybody's going to be using the latest. And if you want to use the latest, you really have two options. Find some random blog online where somebody already has the latest version you know ready for you to download, and you just have to trust that they did it right. Or, well, there's the source, build it yourself. So
So I might be revealing my ignorance here. So if Git SCM, if they push a new version,
mhm.
if there's a new version of Git, like I'm a Mac user, so I just go and download it. Or I go to Homebrew even, and I think it'll
Well,
take care
see,
of it there.
with on a Mac, yeah, yes, you have Homebrew, but that's a different version of Git than what is installed by default on
Hmm.
the Mac, because Git is installed by default from Apple. It is a very specific version, but it's an older version, which is why you have Homebrew, which then will allow you to get a newer version. But because of reasons, it may not be the newest version. It's like, oh, well, they're still testing the newest version to make sure that it works properly on a Mac. So, well, you still may be a version or two behind from the actual, latest version. And
I see.
that's even more true on Windows. But, like I said, for Linux, you have, 100 different versions just because, with Ubuntu, you have the LTS versions, the long-term support versions, and they're going to specifically intentionally not update things unless if it's a massive security risk. Okay, well, you're at least going to be you know that if you are on the latest version of the LTS, you know that you're going to at least get that version. But everybody else, whatever their distribution decides is going to be the best.
What would you say now? We don't have the data in front of us, so this is definitely an estimation. But what would you say is like the distribution of the distros in terms of popularity these days?
Depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about server side or desktop,
Oh,
um, because server, I would probably say either Ubuntu, Red Hat, like the Red Hat Enterprise Linux, or, and this may be a slight surprise to you because it's probably not going to be one that you've ever heard of, um, Alpine Linux. And the reason I say that is because Alpine is the version of Linux that's used in so many Docker containers.
hmm,
And so it's a very stripped down, very simple version of Linux that just
excellent.
works.
All right, I guess the final written question I have for you here.
All right.
Um, what are some of the management challenges with regards to, Linux developer workstations? Like, are these managed environments, or do you rely on the developer to manage their respective workstations?
So I've actually worked in so many different types of environments, everything from, oh, well, here's your computer, install whatever you want on it. And if you need the license for something, just let management know and we'll get it for you. All the way up to, you know, this is a computer. Here's the list of approved software. And even to get that installed, talk to IT. They will install it for you. And if you need something that is not on this list, try to convince your manager why you need it. And then maybe you might get it. So luckily, ever since I've learned about, GitKraken, I've been able to convince every single one of my management teams to allow me to use GitKraken. Some were a little bit more difficult than others, but you know, they've eventually relented and said, if you believe it helps, then we'll do it. So
What's been something that you've noticed, like an argument that you've made in favor of the app that seems to convince doubters that it's helpful and useful for you or your team?
a lot of it boils down to being able to, let's say, do a quick search uh, for a commit. Like somebody may potentially have um, the hash for a commit, but they're like, well, we don't know exactly if this particular commit is in the release for the release that's in production or on the development branch. But we know that this happened, but it was so long ago, and we have so many just random weird branches off out there that have been merged and pulled and just random stuff. It's like we don't really know. It's like, okay, well, let's look at this. We can find that commit. Now we found that we can just do a solo on the branch that we're wanting. Oh, look, yes, it's right there. Okay, that took like 10 seconds. Whereas previously they'd spend like, you know, minutes or sometimes even a couple of hours trying to figure it out via the command line because they're like, well, it's hard to visualize if a commit is in a particular branch or not.
Well, sweet. I've gotten through my prepared list of questions, but do you have any final thoughts you wish to share with us?
I mean, I know that, pretty much everywhere I've gone, I've been able to convince pretty much everybody on almost every single team that I've worked on, at least one person per team, if not the entire team, eventually starts using GitKraken in the end because of just how simple it is and just intuitive. It's like, even if it's just, okay, I just need to make one small, quick little change. And there you go. You don't even have to fire up your IDE. Oh, you can just edit the file straight in here. Okay. Oh, wow, that's cool. Didn't know this. Um, and just it's the small little attentions to detail that you find that just happen to work out the way that it works out.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Nexus, for your time. It's been great chatting with you, and we'll see you around on the Slack community.
I'll be there.